Hi everybody. Okay, I'm going to read you a few short stories in the book today. See if I can keep track of where I'm at though when I'm reading. Sometimes I find it hard. Now, maybe if I'm going to hold this up like this. I can read when it's close to my face, unfortunately. Or I can do it like this. Okay. Gilead Ann Jasper Irwin. Mrs. Irwin was born in Pulaski County, Kentucky, June 16, 1839. She was 14 years old, a woman grown, for in those days most girls were married before they were 16, when she crossed the Missouri River on May Day, 1853. With her family on their way to Oregon, she was interviewed at her home in Philomath, Oregon. Well, one day we had a sick cow, so we laid over half a day doctoring the sick cow. The rest of the wagon went on. When we started to overtake the wagon train, 10 or a dozen Indians rode across the road, and one, who was dressed mostly in paint, said we'd have to feed him and the rest of his party. My brother Andrew said, "Get out of the way, you ugly old devil. We don't figure on feeding a pack of lazy, no-account Indians." We started up the oxen. The Indian ran in front of the oxen and waved his arms to make them stop. My brother had a long lashed ox whip. He could hit a horsefly on the leader's horns or cut the heart out of an ace of hearts at 15 feet. He hit that ugly old Indian a crack that sounded like a pistol shot. The blood spurted where the lash cut his flesh. The Indian turned, and my brother flicked the flesh open with his shoulder. On his shoulder. He hit the Indian 6 or 7 times before he had a chance to mount his horse and dig in his heels and gallop away. Every time a lash landed, it brought the blood. My mother was crying for all she was worth. She said, "Oh, Andrew, how could you do it? The Indians will come back tonight and kill us all." Andrew said, "There's no need of your taking on, Ma. I showed those Indians what I could do with my ox whip just now. If they come back tonight, I'll show them what I could do with my rifle." I guess Andrew's sample of what he could do was plenty, for they never came back. That was said on June 28, 1925. I hope when you realize when I'm reading these things, I'm not going, "All right, they hurt the Indians." No, I'm just reading to you exactly what these people said, okay? There's tragedy on all sides. All right. Next one was said by Molly Jett. Mrs. Jett and her husband, Benjamin B. Jett, pioneer, residents of eastern Oregon and Idaho, were married in 1870, about midway between Boise, Idaho, and Huntington, Oregon. She was interviewed at her home in Portland. The history as it really happens, and as you read about it, isn't it all alike? For instance, you can read in history about a bloodthirsty chief Egan was. Egan visited our home frequently. He was one of the wisest and most honest Indians I ever knew. Always the white people making promises to the Indians, and always they breaking them. Always they crowded the Indians off their land, and always there is trouble if the Indians resist. In the fall of 1877, the Bangkok Indians on the Fort Hall Reservation were going hungry. They learned the Congress had appropriated money for them, but the money must have gone elsewhere, for the Indians didn't get the food. Under the treaty, Camas Prairie belonged to the Indians, but the white man herded their hogs there, which rooted up and destroyed all of the Camas on the Indians which the Indians depended on for food. The Indians tried to make the herders go away, but they wouldn't do it. So the Indians fired at them and wounded them. That started the war. Chief Egan told the young men that it was folly to oppose the whites, that he had talked to the other chiefs, and that in every war with the whites the Indians had been defeated, but the young men felt that they would rather be killed than starve to death. Buffalo Horn was the leader of the Bannocks, not Bangkoks, I apologize, Bannocks. He had been a scout with the Nez Perce War. The Umatilla Indians were going to fight with the Bannocks, but changed their minds and fought against them. The Umatilla volunteers attacked Chief Egan, and his men, killed Egan and 9 of his warriors, and took the head of Chief Egan and the scalps of the other Indians to Pendleton. I felt very sad over Egan's death. My husband had bought Chief Egan's a Henry rifle, paying $22 for it. This was before the war, when Egan wanted the gun for hunting. When we lived up there with Bannock Indians all around us, we found them strictly honest. Whenever a calf was killed or a horse stolen by some renegade white, it was always blamed on the Bannock Indians. And that was an interview that was done April 24th, 1934. So let's see. This one's a long story, so I'm going to skip ahead here. I will read that in the next time I do a story video. Hang on, my book's falling apart here. Here we go. Here's a couple. Excuse me. Sarah Elizabeth Kinney Layton. Mrs. Layton was born in Iowa in 1845 and came to Oregon with her family in 1847. She lived many years in the Willamette Valley. She was interviewed at her home in Seaside, Oregon. You ask me, as I look back at my life, if I would change it in any way. I sure would. I would have been a man instead of a woman. When I was a girl, I used to love to ride wild horses. In fact, I liked to do all the things a man could do without much comment, but which were considered very improper for a girl to do. When I was a girl, we had no movies, no joy rides in autos, not very many parties, but plenty of housework and mending to be taken care of, and taking care of babies and nursing and things of that kind. It seems to me that the young women of today have a much easier time than when I was a girl. And that was January 9th, 1922. Next one, Mrs. E.A. Hunt. Mrs. Hunt crossed the plains with her family in 1850 when she was 6 years old. She was interviewed in her home in Portland. There were 4 of us children who crossed the plains with them, our parents, in 1850. After coming to Oregon, my parents had 5 more children. While crossing the plains, all of my father's oxen died but one. In the same train with us was a man named Tinsley, who also lost all of his oxen but one. Mr. Tinsley and my father went into partnership, hitching the 2 oxen to father's wagon, as it was the better wagon, abandoned the goods that they were carrying, except for their provisions, and reached Oregon. When they got to Columbia Slough, one of their 2 oxen died, so all my father had was a half interest in 1 oxen and a wagon. Father decided to stay on Columbia Slough. He and a man named Pullen moved their families into a cabin there and went out to secure work. Father got a job splitting rails. He had worked only a day or 2 when he made a mislick with his axe and cut off all of his toes on 1 foot. He nearly died from loss of blood and was lame for the rest of his life. I was 7 years old. I had to help earn money for the family. I secured a job doing housework for a woman who was sick. When Father could hobble around on his lame foot, he came to Portland, and Jimmy Stevens gave him a job rowing a dugout across the Willamette between Portland and the East Bank, ferrying passengers. Later, Jimmy Stevens built the first ferry boat to ply on the Willamette, and Father ran it. In the fall of 1851, we moved to a place on the west slope of Mount Tabor. Our place was located in the heavy timber, and I can remember how frightened we children were when the wolves came around and howled at night, or when we heard the cougars screaming. My sister Harriet Julia was born in this cabin in the winter of 1851. Father would come home every Saturday night and stay till Sunday night, and then walk back through the forest along the trail to his cabin on the banks of the Willamette, where he lived while working on the ferry boat. There's no date on that one, so we don't know when that interview was done. Okay, two more, because they're not that long. Nancy J. Fenn McPherson. Mrs. McPherson was born in Pike County, Illinois in 1840 and came across the plains to Oregon with her father, John Fenn, in 1847. She was interviewed at her home in Portland. When I was 15, I married William Angus McPherson. We named our first baby William Green McPherson. William for his father and Green for Green MacDonald, my husband's closest and dearest friend. They loved each other like brothers. Green used to stop at our house at noon whenever he could and take dinner with us. He was strongly Southern and believed slavery was a divine institution. My husband was a strong Union man. That was one subject they avoided. One day, Green drove up to our house, looking more serious than usual. He put up his team and came in. He and Angus sat down to dinner. I had a particularly good dinner that day, Green said. Green said Fort Sumter had been fired on. The South is no longer submitting to interference with its institutions by the North. I suppose you will hold the North, Angus. My husband nodded. Green said, I'm for the South. If it comes to war here in Oregon, we shall be on opposite sides. I am willing to shoot the other Yankees, but I am not going to fire over your head, Angus. I couldn't stain my hands with your blood. Green and my husband arose, and my husband extended his hand across the table and said, We have come to the parting of the ways. Goodbye, old friend. They shook hands and left the table. I begged them to sit down and to eat their last meal together, but they were too deeply moved. For the next 30 years, they met each other without a sign of recognition, and they never spoke again. And that was read to the Oregon Journal on November 5th, 1922. And this last one is a really short one. This is Mrs. O.K. Kronberg. Mrs. Kronberg, daughter of Captain Judah Parker, founder of Parkersburg in Coos County, was a pioneer resident of Bandon, Oregon. It was easy to make a living in those days. The cougars would frequently drive the deer down to the beach, and the deer would swim out beyond the breakers and not come ashore until daylight, when the cougars had gone back to the mountains. A person with a skiff could go out about daybreak and kill a deer in the water. There were deep bayous running in from Oregon. At low tide, you could get a boatload of fine oysters, which were attached to the roots of the trees along the bayous. The trees along the shore were full of ducks. They had never been shot at, and you could literally pick them from the trees. And that was read on December 15th, 1930. So that's it for today's reading. A whole bunch of short ones. The next one I will do will be a long one. And I hope you are all enjoying your Saturday. So Until tomorrow, I hope you all have a pleasant day, and I hope you have a very pleasant evening. And I will see you for my next out and about video. So take care, and bye.